Hello there, it's Kim Hesse and welcome to the next episode of Event Ninja News, the place to get hints and tips for your next business event. Now today's question comes from Marcus, and Marcus has asked me, Kim, do you have any tips for creating an event timeline, or sometimes referred to as a project plan? Marcus, this is a great question and one that event managers struggle with a lot and wonder what to include in the timeline. Where do I start? Am I including everything I need to? So this is what I do, and it's a bit of a two-part process for me, and you'll find out why as we get further on. So where do I start? I start with trusty Excel because everybody has Excel. It's easily shared. You can turn this into a shared Google document if you want. So starting with my beloved Excel, I put 4 columns along the top of my spreadsheet, and those columns are task, details, assigned to, and due date. So let me explain what they mean. So task is where we describe the task, so what's going on, what needs to be done. The details are then related to that task, so maybe it's a printing task and the details are that the advertisement needs to be created in 100 millimeters by 200 millimeters. So a few details about that task. The assigned to, so who is responsible for this task, and then the 4th column is the due date. Then what I want you to do, working down your Excel spreadsheet, is put a heading for each section of your event. So for example, venue, catering, printing, anything else that's related to your event like speakers, for example. Then what you do within these 4 columns that you've created is you start plugging in things that you know. Make it easy on yourself to start off with. So maybe under the venue heading, you put in a date for when you need to give the venue your estimated guest numbers. And then when you need to give the venue your final guest numbers, maybe any payment dates. Maybe under catering, you need to put a date about when you need to get your menu selections back. Maybe you need to put a date saying that we need to talk to the committee about what menu selections before we need to send the selection to the venue. And in the printing section, maybe you're creating a conference booklet. So there'll be bigger items that will come into your event timeline like a booklet. And this has many due dates aligned to it. So what I mean by this is what you want to do is work back from these bigger milestones. So say you need an event booklet printed. So looking at our event date, I always like to get my booklet sent to me at least a week before the event. So the printed final version, so I can see it, touch it, have a look at it, make sure we've got time to courier it to the venue. So then talking to your printer, when does your printer need it? For them to enable the delivery to your office the week before the event. Then working backwards, talking to your designer, when do they need all of the information and how long is it going to take them to design it? And then knowing the team you work with or your management or your committee, how long is it going to take them for them to have a look through the booklet and approve it and proof it and go through 2 or 3 proofing rounds with your designer before you can get that to the printer. So looking at those big milestones and working back and talking to your suppliers. So this is why your event timeline might actually take you some time to create, because you've got to talk to the printer, you've got to talk to the graphic designer, you've got to be talking to couriers, maybe you've got to figure out when you need all of that speaker information by for the booklet to send to the graphic designer, which then will help you establish some dates for maybe when you need to be sending letters to invite speakers, or maybe you're going to open a call for papers or a call for abstracts. So you can see that your event timeline is something that you'll build on. And you know what, if you're creating this for the first time, it's the first time you've run the event, don't worry. Keep adding to things as you go along. You don't need to have everything in your timeline, because sometimes there are just things that come up. Sometimes there are simply things that you're like, oh, I forgot to put that in my timeline. That was so obvious. So start with a really good base, brainstorm everything you can, every possible section of your event and the things that you think you're going to need timelines against. And then as you're going add them in, and then use this and build on it for future events, and you're going to have a great and a beautiful event timeline that you can then take and apply to all of your events. Now, remember, I said this was a two-part process. So some of you who like the Gantt chart with all of the months along the columns and then the coloured sort of blocks saying when items are due, you could start putting that into what you've created in step 1. For me, my brain doesn't really work that way. I look at a Gantt chart with the months and the colours and it just kind of does something funny to my head. So if you love Gantt charts, then go along and create one. But if something more like a calendar organised by months works more for your brain, like mine, then part 2 is for you. So what I do now, once I've got my timeline all wrapped up and I've got my headings for each component of my event, I then I create another Excel spreadsheet, trusty Excel, and I split this into 6 columns. Now I'm going to include a bit of a template below for you for this one so that you can see what my timeline kind of looks like in a finished product. So my 6 columns along the top are day of the week, and then the date, so the date of that month that the day falls on. And then I take what we did in part 1 is the task, the detail, who that role is assigned to, and then I just have a status column, whether it's in progress or complete. So then looking at the way that I organise this, it's organised by month instead of organised down the page by the section or venue or catering or printing, for example. So I can look at this spreadsheet and quickly go, okay, what's coming up for the next month? What's coming up for the next week? And I know what tasks and what projects I need to really be prioritizing for the weeks ahead. I hope this has helped you. As I said, I've included a bit of a template in part 2. I haven't included a template for part 1 because I want you to be a little bit creative with this, because every event is unique, every event is different. You'll be working to sometimes tighter timelines and sometimes you'll have longer timelines. So brainstorm all of the things you think you might need for your event timeline and then have a look at the template of how mine sort of ends up in a finished product. I'd love any thoughts you have on how you're creating timelines, and I look forward to catching you on the next episode of Event Ninja News.